See, episode 3.
What? Episode 3? Scene 1,
I
episode
think
3.
I meant to say we're starting episode 3.
You were doing the cut, but scene 1, episode 3. Cut!
Sometimes you start the show and it makes sense and it's okay. But you go farther along and you're like, what? Wait, huh?
Go back and rewatch and you're like, how did that make sense to me the first time?
Which is odd because you're like, it should still make sense. The beginning of the show should still make sense with the ending of the flipped show. I shouldn't do that. I'm going to shake the camera.
Yeah, and yet I swear there are some things that it doesn't make sense with later.
Yeah. And I think there's a few times in this one where I'm like...
That's why I say there was a whole ton of details.
Just a little bit more context.
There was a whole ton of details that I understand is hard to portray in the show, but there were ways they could have done it.
And they should have cut Arya and Yato down. There were definitely times when it's like, no, right especially now you are useless. You are dragging the show.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the biggest time when they were dragging the show down was when they go to get her medicine. Again, yes, this is later on, but I feel like that is one of the biggest times when they're dragging the show down with Arya and Yato. Is that because I'm just like, why?
In a way, I don't remember how many times we went to see them.
Doing nothing.
Yeah, but it's supposed to be showing you the heartbreaking romance of how much he loves her and yet he's losing her.
It's like, yeah, except the way that dude's portraying it, I feel like it's more like an obsession of an object or something. I don't feel like it was actual love. The way he's portraying it, like...
No. But there is a lot of stuff in this thing that they do draw from other places, like that whole, later on, with the whole funeral procession thing. I forget where that came from. It was Arya that went and did that with Baye somewhere. I am very, very, very happy that it was Rishan instead, for numerous reasons.
There's nothing wrong with it.
That's the Easter egg parts that I was talking about, where if you know what side stories they came from, it's actually really interesting how many things they brought together to make a show with.
Mm-hmm.
What I don't like is the inconsistency part of it and the part that they made up purely for the show that contradict things.
The actor and the actresses do.
Well, yeah, and the filler part of it that's got nothing to do with anything.
They don't necessarily mesh.
But, like, the thing is, they had potential for so many other things they could have done, and they focused on this instead. You could have made it a 48-episode drama that focused on a bunch of this stuff and a little bit of this, and it would have been super cool. Instead, you barely touched this and focused on all this, and you're like, what? A bitter disappointment. Major bitter disappointment.
Arya could have been, and should have been, better. Because, like we say, even when Chen-Pi uses that skill of Arya's, clearly Arya knows something is fighting. And then you see him do that skill once. And you're like, clearly he could have been a lot better. And yet, they fall short in using him.
Yep.
And, like I say, later on when he is involved, it's like, dude, get your freaking hands out of your pockets and actually maybe look like you want to be here.
Yep.
Talk about circling the scenes Rishan's in. Later on, you need to circle the scenes Arya's got his hands in his pockets. All these characters and the names that A, you don't see for forever from now, and B, it's like, dude, I barely see these characters, and you put them in the names.
95. There's 10 years between them. It's 85 to 95.
Yeah, 95. That's what I said. Initially I said 97. I'm like, no. 95. 85 to 95. That's the other thing about Chen-Pi. None of these guys were taken necessarily that incredibly serious if he was only a 16-year-old, but at the same time, I suppose they would if he's still a bit of a murderous 16-year-old.
Well, I mean, when he's got a temper like he's got...
But at the same time...
But also, how many years is this supposed to be after Spring Killing?
Be slightly
the Chen-Pi movie, how long is this supposed to be later? So he can't possibly be 16. No. How old was he in that movie?
Exactly.
Never mind this being how many years later.
Don't think he's supposed to be 27. like the actor, but
No, he's not supposed to be anywhere near 27. But I'd say he's supposed to be something like 18 or 19 maybe, but then like say, I mean, even then,
yeah,
he's what, 16 in Spring Killing? It's a little freaky. Tim be a good character. Oh my god.
It's soft-hearted apparently.
Soft-hearted? What the crap?
And he's down there again.
Mm-hmm. So I say, he's doing all this tons and tons and tons of research on this tomb that he has a huge map about, and yet when they go down there, it's like, where's all this plotting and planning that you did?
Well, like I say, don't bring Foye into the mix. Don't talk to Foye about any of it.
Yeah, it's like, what are you even down here for?
When you to actually join
what are you
him
even
and
down here
talk to
doing
him?
this for if you were not planning on doing anything with it?
Mhm.
You're still saying, no, I'm not going to do anything with it, and yet you're down here doing all of this tons of plotting and planning and measuring and all kinds of everything. And it's in the maze part of it there that he's got.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it's the maze part later on. It's like you completely forget that any of this happened because it does not come into play anywhere.
Nope, but he got just as lost as the others.
Yeah, and had to figure out how to get through the maze when he's in the maze.
Mm-hmm. Either way.
And it's like he's noticing something about like a height difference and whatnot. Where does this play into anything later on?
Yeah.
Am I just forgetting where they bring it up, or is it like, what is the point of this? It would be cool if it had a point, but I don't remember it having a point. Like, it doesn't... She did quite happily, too. She walked down and went, ah.
Go figure.
So dramatic, and it takes forever to explain what actually happened with that thing.
Why it doesn't make any sense either. To make it that thing.
Well, that's probably because she's more fragile than him.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was, if I was editing and the video goes suddenly zoomed in on someone's face. That would be your face. I don't know how he's comfortable at all with his arms.
I know. I was like, that's gotta be killing your neck, man.
Well, no, it would help your neck if your hands are there, but
Well, I
his
suppose,
arms.
because then you're not actually pressing your neck up against the wall, but...
You get one guess which one of them actually was sleeping. Given their reactions there.
Mm-hmm. Hides behind Claire.
That's the other sad thing.
Again.
That's what we were both, I think we were both, or at the very least me, saying about how annoying it is. When you see, like, it makes it look like Rishan is actually a better fighter than Foye, because every time they film Foye fighting, it's so intensely over-the-top dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
And posy and perfect and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, I know you're a good fighter. I can tell you're a brilliant fighter, but Rishan is way scarier.
Slow-mo scenes
Rishan is way scary because it's just like dun. Whereas every time that he fights, it's like slow and dramatic.
Powerful.
Yeah, that's the thing. They're trying to make it look powerful rather than just letting it be powerful.
Like what? Was he not that great at the action scenes or something? Which he doesn't look like. He doesn't look that great. And in Age of Legend, he was perfectly.
He's just a known pretty face, so they have to like slow down and frame it.
The fighting.
Versus Rishan, Ming-An was a nobody, so they can just have him actually act instead of pose for pictures.
Maybe.
But anyway.
But like say again, it's not actually his fault. Age of Legends, he does a perfectly fine job with his action scenes. And they're not over the top. Well, yeah,
that's why I'm not saying it was the actor's fault for these shots, like whether he was good at fighting or not. No, it's just the way they decided to film it. So for some reason, they decided to make his fight intensely over the top dramatic, and I'm just sitting here rolling my eyes.
Yeah.
Whereas when Rishan fights, I'm like, oh my gosh, you scare me so bad.
Yeah.
You are a very scary fighter. Because there's just naturally, whoa, rather than just being like, oh, overdone.
5 different fights? At least off the top of my head. These two we just saw, and then the one in the actual tomb, and then a couple others. And yeah, every single one of them are very, very dramatic. Like, every single one of them.
I think maybe there's one that isn't overdone. Possibly.
Well, I think out of all of them, maybe the train one isn't nearly as overdone. But most of them are very overdone when Foyer fights.
Yeah. They just film them so dramatically. They're too overdone. Too sensationalized. If we made a compilation of every time he said Foyer, I bet you it'd be like half an hour long.
Like I say, everything that comes out of his mouth has to start with Foyer. If he's had any sort of pause, the next thing that has to come out of, or the first thing that comes out of his mouth has to be Foyer.
And then they have to add this in here, too. Not only does Foyer want him to come help him, they also have to have the Japanese all of a sudden, come help us, Arya. So, like, everybody wants Arya, and he doesn't want anybody. He's like... He's supposed to be so talented that everybody under the sun desperately wants his help, and yet you barely get to see that he's actually got any talent.
Mm-hmm.
I know he's supposed to, but within this thing, you barely get to see it. It's like he's not worth so much attention. He really isn't. Yeah. Even for editing purposes when it's cut out, I just cannot listen to the Chinese opera. No! Pay me $1 million and I might listen to it for 1 minute.
The second time through, or even the first time through, if they gave you the proper payoff for him being so talented and so good at what he does, if they give you the proper payoff,
like you get to see glimpses of it. He does have some kind of amazing power, but
as annoying. But they don't give you that proper payoff.
Not really, no. You just see teeny tiny little glimpses, and it's like, how come everybody within the show gets to know that it's supposed to be there, and I never get any of it? That's not how a show is supposed to work.
Exactly.
Don't tell me that he's this, and then only show me like this.
Fights, at least he's powerful. He knows how to fight. He knows what he's doing, for the most part. But like Arya, you're not proving to me that you know what you're doing. You're not proving to me that people should be wanting your help. That they're bribing your servants to get your help. Like, it makes no sense.
I'm like, oh yeah, I paused it because you were talking. No, I paused it because the opera was there, and the opera isn't in this part. But then you were talking, so.
Yeah.
He keeps going to the secret chamber these days because there must be a problem. Really? Because I don't see you involved with Foyer at all. There's zero reason for him to continually go down there. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. It's the dumbest thing ever that he keeps going down there. When he supposedly doesn't want to get involved.
There's no payoff.
No, because what does he keep going down there for?
He constantly went down there, but there was a payoff later.
Yeah, like what on earth is he supposedly figuring out? We don't see him knowing anything later on because he was studying this map for 3,000 years.
Seriously, that is a whale.
Whale or a shark? It's a shark.
It's way too big to be in his pond.
Maybe it's just a moving screen.
In that time?
Which is more unlikely? That it's literally a TV screen or that it's a shark in his pond?
Honestly, I don't know if I put anything past him. It might be a shark in his pond. Who knows? And he looks like he figured something out there, too.
It's much more honest and open, too. I'm not him. You don't have to hide things from me. I'm not your husband. You don't have to hide things from me. Mm-hmm. He's hiding a ton of stuff from her. She's hiding a ton of stuff from him. But can't you tell how much they love each other?
Mm-hmm.
Messed up.
Like, oh my gosh. Bae.
The further it goes, I love watching Bae and Rishan. Because the further it goes, like, at first it's like, bigger friends. Instead of tolerating each other because they both love Foyer, later on, they are actual friends.
Which is what I say. Well, yeah, okay, so it seems like Bae doesn't necessarily know Rishan that well, but at the same time, it's like, clearly Foyer is very close to him. Or finds him special or whatever, somehow. Bae not knowing that Rishan is actually related to Foyer.
Mm-hmm.
Just the more you think about it, the more it doesn't make sense. Because like I say, even if he's not close to Rishan, you would think he would have asked Foyer at some point. Why is Rishan?
Well, but I mean, you can be pretty close to people and not ask stuff like that. And Foyer, because of their army ranks, it makes sense that Rishan is always with Foyer. Because he's literally his right-hand man.
It does.
That's how they seem to function in any show you
but
watch.
You would still think you would be curious.
His rank and his rank, and they're like together.
But you would still think you'd be curious. If you know of the Zhang family, you would still be like,
And that's probably all because that's like 3 hours of filming and I'm like tired.
But yeah, like you say, again, watching it through, it's like, okay, maybe I'm just misremembering things. But again, those first few episodes seem so disconnected from the rest of it.
The first 2 especially.
And then, yeah, I do feel like they contradict themselves a couple of times within the show itself. Not even looking at the wider universe, they feel like they contradict themselves within the show.
And they don't explain themselves to the point where you don't have to tell me all of the secrets everywhere, but there's some things that just, because of the way they're interacting, you assume this. And then all of a sudden you hear this later on, like Rishan being a Zhang. You assume this because of how close they all are and how much they know each other and interact with each other and all the rest of the stuff that's happening and all the other references they make.
If you didn't know anything about the world, you might not think everything that they're actually related.
But I mean, even just the tiny things he said, like we have to rely on the Zhang family and the fact that he's always there with him and the fact that his name is Zhang. Even if you know that that's a common last name and that doesn't necessarily mean they're related because he already said the Zhang family, meaning he's not the only one. Etc., etc. And then way later on, all of a sudden, wait, he didn't know that he was I feel like Rishan in that moment. I thought you knew! And you're not supposed to do that to your audience. So there's a few things where it's like you assume something and you're wrong. And I mean, sometimes that happens. But when the show is the one that is unclear and therefore... I mean, and it because of certain things makes you...
It makes sense for him not to know, but at the
it's
same
like
time,
underhandedly leading you to believe this. And then you're made to look stupid for believing that because it's actually this, no duh.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's not how you're supposed to do a show.
Yeah.
So anyway, unless there's something else to say right now, I guess that's it. Now we can stop.